ASMR video. Today I thought it would be interesting to tell you about some of the recent books that I've been reading and make some recommendations in case you don't know what to read but are looking for something new. So, let me start by saying that I tend to prefer sci-fi and fantasy. Sci-fi and fantasy. That's hard to write backwards. Sci-fi and fantasy, those are my preferred genres, so most of what I've been reading has been in those genres. I usually try to read a book every 2 weeks, so I have 6 physical books that I've read recently, and I have a Kindle, and I've read quite a few digital books on here. I will start with the physical books, and then I'll mix some of the digital books in. So first up, I read When the Moon Hits Your Eye by John Scalzi. This is the most recent book from John Scalzi. He is a prominent sci-fi author who has written books like Old Man's War, which is a sci-fi series, Starter Villain, and Kaiju Preservation Society, which I also read recently. This book, along with Starter Villain and Kaiju, are very different from what he has been doing in the past. These are, I don't want to say silly, but they're kind of quirky books rather than serious ones. And I really, really, really enjoy this kind of sci-fi. This book is about what happens when the moon turns to cheese. So, obviously kind of silly, but I really, really loved it. It is strange in that there are 30 chapters, if I recall correctly. And each one, well, almost each one, follows a different character. So you don't get a lot of character development, but what you do get is a really interesting and fun story. And much like his more serious work, there are some things in here that make you question who we are as humans and how we behave in the universe and how we treat each other. So this is a really, really good read. I don't think it's even out in paperback yet. That's how new it is, but I would really recommend picking this up. I am not going to leave links in the description for any of these books because I'm not interested in earning affiliate commissions, but you can just look up the name of the book on Amazon or wherever you purchase books or rent them. You can just look up the name and find them there. The last I checked, this was still available at Barnes & Noble, so if you like physical books, I would recommend going there or to a local bookseller if you are lucky enough to have one near you. Next up, I have it's not hard sci-fi. In case you don't know, hard sci-fi is kind of sci-fi that could happen given the limitations of our universe. So something like, let's see, Star Wars is very much not hard sci-fi. None of the stuff in there is explained, and most of it is just nonsense, which is not to say that that kind of sci-fi is bad. It's just, it doesn't make sense in our universe. Something like the Expanse series, or Interstellar, although I haven't seen that, so I don't know for sure if that would be considered hard sci-fi, but those can happen in our universe, and they're based on science, and hard sci-fi delves into science a bit more. Meru is kind of an interesting blend of hard sci-fi and soft sci-fi, in that it discusses some scientific basis for some of the things that happen, but for the most part, they just couldn't exist in our universe, or at least the universe that we know. So this would be considered soft sci-fi. It is about a human who lives in a world where humans are not that common, and there are other varieties of beings that are developed rather than born in the traditional sense. And this human is one of the only ones who can survive on the planet Meru. It's a recently discovered planet, and humans haven't been able to travel intergalactically or interplanetarily for quite some time in the book, and that human gets the opportunity to explore that newly discovered planet. This wasn't really my favorite book. There is a sequel called Loki, and I did not read it simply because I wasn't a huge fan of this book. There's kind of a romance element to it, which normally I don't mind, but it seemed contrived, I guess, in this book a little bit. But I believe that this is the breakout novel for S.B. Divya, so if you are interested in supporting new novelists, I think maybe you might want to check this one out. Next up, I'm not going to talk much about this, but I read The Secrets of Story by Matt Bird, and in fact, I am still reading it. I finished this twice, and I'm on the third read-through. This is a nonfiction book, and it's the only nonfiction book I'm going to discuss here just because I did read it recently. It's basically, Matt Bird is a screenwriter. I think he's from Australia, and he goes through all of the secrets of story, the things that make good stories, and it is a phenomenal book for anyone who's writing fiction. I've read probably 24 books on fiction writing and how to improve your writing and develop your writing process and create characters that people genuinely connect with and care about, and this is the best book that I've read on that topic so far. So if you are curious about the secrets of story and what makes for a good story, and especially if you are into writing fiction, I would 100% recommend this book. There's also a sequel, so to speak, The Secrets of Character. I also read that twice. I prefer this one. I think it has more useful information, but honestly, I would recommend reading both. Next, I read And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. This is a really not really old, but comparatively old when you consider the other books that I have been reading. And then there were none. Copyright 1939 by Agatha Christie. This is a thriller. It's kind of a whodunit, and I did enjoy this. I think it's a little outdated, honestly. I'm comparing that to recent whodunits that I've watched. I haven't even read that many. I do love the genre. Clue is one of my all-time favorite movies, and that is a classic whodunit. And I recently started at the Knives Out movie and the sequel Glass Onion. Those are fantastic. I love those. And I recently started watching The Residence on Netflix, which is spectacular. It is really up there with Clue. So anyway, those shows and movies kind of make this seem outdated, but it is still good, and I would recommend reading it. It is a classic. Also, something really interesting that I learned about Agatha Christie when I started reading this is that she's the best-selling author after the Bible. I don't even know if you can count that because it's not a single author, but she's the best-selling author after the Bible and Shakespeare, which is so crazy. 1939 this book came out, and she has so many other books that were bestsellers. So if you want to kind of connect to the roots of whodunit, I would recommend picking this up. Next, I read Throne of Glass. Probably everybody watching this has heard of this book, and I don't need to tell you much about it. This is a long series. I think there are 9 books, if I remember correctly, by Sarah Moss. This is the tame one, if you're looking for something that's not adult fiction. This is very tame. There is romance in the series, but there's nothing explicit. As far as I know, I did not read the entire series. I read the first book in the series, which is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. And this is a #1 New York Times best-selling author. So I read the first one, which is just called Throne of Glass. And I also read the second book, which in the series, which is called Crown of Midnight, and that is also by Sarah J. Maas. The first book I liked. I didn't think it was like the greatest book that I've ever read, but it actually is what inspired me to get back into writing after a short hiatus. So there's that. I think once this book started, there was more of a focus on the romance, which I'm not that big of a fan of, but the world building is good, and the character building is really good too. And this book is beloved by many people, so I wouldn't necessarily take my word for how good or not good it is, even though I don't think it's not good. And it's a long series, so if you like reading series, I would say this one is a good one to get into and see if you like it. And like I said before, I do a lot of reading on my Kindle. I prefer reading physical books, and I prefer holding physical books, but the convenience of digital is kind of hard to ignore. especially if you have the Libby app. If you don't and you like reading and you have an e-reader, go get the Libby app. It's free, and if you have a library card, you link your library card to it, to your account, and then you can rent books digitally from your phone and send them immediately to your Kindle. It is the most convenient way to read ebooks, and it's free. It's totally free. So go get that. It's called Libby, Libby, Libby. I would recommend that app. So on that app, recently I read Intergalactic Mega Chef. I think that is by Lavanya Lakshminarayan, and I'm probably butchering that name, and I'm sorry for that. I think that Mega Chef is also a breakout novel from that author, and it was so good. I very strongly recommend you going to pick up that book. It is about a chef far in the future who travels away from her home planet in pursuit of winning the Intergalactic Mega Chef competition, which is it's kind of like the Great British Bake Off or Chopped or something like that. It's a cooking competition, but she goes to win that, and they reveal her backstory, and she links up with this other character who has this whole other backstory, and I loved it. I fell in love with the world. The world building is really, really good. I read a review about the world building specifically that it wasn't super consistent, but I guess if you're like a real stickler for strict world building that makes perfect sense, then maybe you won't love it. But if you just want a good story in a really, really cool futuristic world, I can't recommend it enough. It was so good. And I believe there's a sequel to that coming out. It's not out yet, though. I also read Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. That is a series of, I think it's like 12 or 13 books now. I read book 1, book 2, and book 3. That is a fantasy series. And it was really, really cool. It's about this girl who discovers that she's like the lowest class of society, and she discovers that she has powers that let her use metals around her and metals that she consumes to do things. So she can push against certain metals and pull against certain metals and use different metals to connect to people's minds and foresee, well, I won't spoil anything because she discovers some additional powers as the story progresses. But the world building in that is very, very good, and the character development is good. The story is just great. The first book in particular, the ending, absolutely loved it, and I feel like it's so rare that I can say that I genuinely love the end of a book. But that one, I really, really did. I ended up stopping the series after the third book. I think the second book was also really good, and I feel like the third one kind of fell off for me. But I know a lot of people love that series, and if you like Mistborn, Brandon Sanderson is a very prolific writer, so he has many other series that you can check out. I also recently read Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. That is not a hard sci-fi book, but it is a serious sci-fi book, so it's not quirky, it's not silly. It brings up really deep questions about who we are as humans and what we're capable of, and even the importance of persisting as a species. It's kind of deep. It's also dense. It is a little difficult to read at times if you're not a focused reader, which I often am not. It is kind of hard to pay attention to. I do have ADHD, so that could be why it is hard to pay attention to something that doesn't, like, really grab my interest. But the story is really good, the character building is fantastic, and the questions that it asks about the human race at large are second to none. I definitely recommend reading that book. I'm going to pick up another book. Just so I can get some different sounds. I also recently read The Midnight Library, which is, it's not, I guess it kind of is fantasy, but it's more of like a contemporary novel with fantastical elements. Speculative is usually what people call it. So it occurs in the real world, but things that couldn't happen in our world do happen in the book. It's about a woman who is not enjoying her life, and she ends up in this midnight library where this librarian brings her back in time. She's able to go through the endless rows of books and flip through them and see what her life would be like if she had made a specific decision in the past. So it's kind of similar to the movie It's a Wonderful Life. The message is very similar, but it was a quick read and it was good. I would recommend reading that. I also, as I mentioned before, I read Kaiju Preservation Society. A kaiju, for anyone who doesn't know, is a giant monster from Japanese mythology. Godzilla is a classic example. And Kaiju Preservation Society is about this guy who loses his job, and somebody offers him a job working for the Kaiju Preservation Society, and he basically goes to this alternative universe that's like kind of connected to our own, and he works to study the kaiju and preserve their habitat, basically, and the habitat gets threatened, as you might have guessed, because what else would happen in a book about that? And that was really good. It's a very soft sci-fi novel, obviously, because there are giant monsters, but it was a really good read. It was very fast. I think I finished it in like 3 days, maybe. It was very quick, but really good, and I would recommend that if you're looking for something that's easy to read and just has an enjoyable plot. The character development is not great, but I feel like you would read that for the plot and the quirkiness and not really the character development. And I think that those are all of the books that I've read recently. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to what I have to say about them, and hopefully you got some good recommendations for books that you might like to read, especially if you're into sci-fi and fantasy. If you have any recommendations for books from me, I am always open to hearing them. Based on the books that I've read, if you have something that you think I would like, I will absolutely read it. So let me know in the comments. And I just wanted to thank you so much for joining me and say